I think that the engaged workforce is truly often underestimated. And those, it's
Yeah.
you want people more than just to show up, clock in, do what they were asked to do and clock out, but those people who actually are
Yeah.
now sitting at home and they're thinking about that problem. Hello and welcome to the Service-Based Business Society podcast. I am your host, Tiffany-Ann Bottcher. If you are ready to scale your success, grow your business, and live that entrepreneurial life, click subscribe because we're about to get started. Welcome back to another episode. Have you ever dreamed of growing your business to incredible heights and then selling it off to a giant corporation? Or perhaps you've wondered about the opportunities and challenges that come with such bold plans. Today, I'm thrilled to have Scott Springer, founder of Chelwood Consulting Group, join us here on the podcast. With over 30 years of leadership experience, business experience, Scott has dedicated his career to helping businesses achieve sustained growth. His experience spans various industries, including life sciences, consumer packaged goods, retail, and industrial processes. At Chelwood Consulting Group, Scott focuses on people leadership, process improvement, equipment optimization, and continuous improvement methods to elevate businesses to the next level and enhance their bottom line. Scott brings invaluable insights on critical topics such as hiring the right talent, promoting from within, and fostering employee engagement. All of these elements essential for driving intense, sustainable business growth. You won't want to miss the lessons Scott has to share from his extensive experience, and we dive into incredible, valuable topics. I can't wait to share this episode, so welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's so great to have you, and I'm super excited to learn a little bit more about your story and share how your business journey has really evolved. It's a very interesting story, so I can't wait to dive in. Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about going back in time and where you really started in the business world.
So I was in the Navy, graduated from the Naval Academy. I was in the Navy. When I got out, they suggested I go into manufacturing. They do this transition assistance program. And based on what I did in the Navy, they're like, you're a perfect fit for manufacturing. So, I'm like young, don't know. I'm like, okay, went into manufacturing. And I really enjoy it because, all the problem solving and dealing with people and all that. I truly love manufacturing. And so, early on in the career, different supervisor positions, manager positions. And I got into food when I went to Coca-Cola. And then right after Coca-Cola, I was a plant manager and above. I went from company to company. I was kind of the turnaround guy where I went from plant to plant to plant as a plant manager or director, turning plants around that were struggling for one reason or another, whether it's quality systems or production or throughput or whatever it was. I was always did it like every 4 or 5 years. I was like called by a headhunter to go to another company. And then my last big company I worked with was Vital Proteins, and they were fast growing. We grew 100% a year for the 5 years that I was there with the bookends of the years. And then we sold to Nestlé, and I started my own consulting company. So I've been doing this now for 25 to 30 years.
So your story really jumped out at me. And so people may say, manufacturing, this is the Service-Based Business Society. I don't know. And so initially I was like, I don't know if it's a fit. And the reason why your story jumped out at me and something that I was like, we absolutely have to have Scott on the podcast is because that transition of selling a company, you talk about high growth and you're giving these crazy numbers. And then you say, okay, and then we sold to the big guy. And there are so many business owners that dream of, I'm going to grow my company and I'm going to sell it. And there's so many pieces along the way that we don't think about, both in that high growth phase, as well as transitioning then to, Nestlé's a huge conglomerate. So this is, now we've entered the big leagues. And so, but there's a major shift and transition that happens in the company as it goes through that. And so that's the part I was like, you know what, that's what we need to talk about today.
Yeah. So at Vital Proteins, when we first started out, I would say small to mid-sized company, small, $35 to $40 million a year. First year I was there. And the owner was, we're going to double every single year. And it was a very small family type environment. Like everybody knew almost everybody. There was a corporate office where the sales and marketing was. And then you had the plant, the initial plant, which was like a real small plant. And you get to know everybody. Like I was over operations and supply chain. So I knew everybody in operations and supply chain, and it was like very family. You knew their boyfriend, girlfriend's name, husband, wife names, their kids, what their kids do for sports. You get to know everybody. And I really love that environment, where you get to really know everybody. And then you involve in everybody on the growth. We're growing. And I didn't think we would be growing 100% a year. When the owner told me, when we were first meeting, and he's just like, yeah, we're going to grow 100% a year and we're going to sell to some big CPG. I'm like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. I was enthralled with like designing and building his facility. So we were going to build a new facility. And the year after I started, we went in, and I spent the first year designing and building that and scaling up production at a rate of 100% a year. And it was like that first year to two was just grueling. It was just so much work to be done, because prior to me and a few other people starting, there wasn't like this foundation built of manufacturing expertise, the right SOPs that allow for growth, the right strategy to allow for growth, the training of the people. All that stuff was, very little of it was done prior to, a bunch of us starting. And so that first year, it was like getting everybody involved, the training, it was designing the new plant, it was building the new plant, it was we had a whole bunch of supply chain issues that first year, like major issues, just because the growth wasn't planned for properly. And we ended up having some major issues that we overcame all of them, but it was just a lot of work that first year. And then you start to grow, that's year 2, year 3, year 4. We're growing fast, but now everybody's like accustomed to it. Until the point where you get so big that all of a sudden it's like a different company. People start to lose you lose a little bit of personality. You start to transition to, we're going to sell now, we're ready to sell. And you get a little different mindset in the company, when we're at that point. Then you sell, and now you got your big company, mom and pop, who own you. For us, it was Nestlé. Which is it's a great company, but it's a different culture. It's a completely different type of work environment when you're working for that big company.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting parts, I often talk about people being, as you grow, one of the key pieces, and honestly the hardest to add good people and continue on. But it's the people that get you off the ground, the people who, are part of it when you're in the startup phase, and people are working at 2 a.m. and coming up with a crazy idea, and this person has 16 jobs and whatnot.
Yeah.
Those people, and they're so up of the organization. They almost have as much heart and passion as the business owner. And oftentimes we see people, give people part of their business as, it's like, thank you and whatnot. But as the business grows, I see that those same people then, they get a little bit lost in the mix at times, because now their job is more defined. They no longer feel as connected to, the top of the organization. And sometimes it actually causes a bit of a problem through growth, because those same people are not necessarily the people that are those key people moving forward.
It was we didn't have that as much, I would say. And because it was designed, we planned it a little differently. So one thing we did for, first 3-4 years was we would have weekly meetings. Everybody would, like some companies do like a monthly town hall meeting or a quarterly town hall meeting. We did them weekly at the manufacturing site, where everybody got to see everybody. We kept everybody up to date what was going on. They didn't see a lot of the owners and the sales and marketing people as much, because they were in a different office and they were busy growing the sales and marketing. But every week, everybody in the plant got to see every manager, director, VP that was in the supply chain and manufacturing organization. We were sharing what was coming up. Part of when you're growing that fast, one of the hardest things to do is the whole change management, because you're constantly adding equipment, adding people, adding positions, restructuring departments. And that weekly meeting that we did, which lasted like an hour, we really set that up for success, because we would like let people know what was coming down the road all the time. So it wasn't a surprise, like there's a new person here. Who is that person? They knew the person was coming the week before. The person probably knew they were coming.
Right.
Like people on the floor, hourly people on the floor would know, hey, we got a new director starting next week. We're going to send you offer letter out tomorrow. It's like sometimes, they knew ahead of time. And so that transition was a little more smoother than in other places I worked, I'll say. The other thing we did was we worked really hard at trying to promote from within as much as we could. You can't fill every position. but probably almost everybody from, I would say 75%, not almost everybody, about 75% from that first year all got promoted 1 or 2 times over the next 2 or 3 years. We had temps that went to warehouse manager, production supervisors, people that came in and, they went from like a supply chain planner to a supply chain supervisor manager. Everybody tried to move everybody up. We couldn't move everybody up. Some people just didn't have the motivation or the skill set, didn't want to do it, but it was quite impressive how many people we got to move up. And that kept people motivated and kept them engaged, definitely.
So 2 key pieces come out of what you were saying for me. And number one, I think that in today's day and age, the focus is the anti-meeting and moving away from the meetings. And so as you're talking about this group of people, I think that's an expensive meeting if as the group grows. And so now for you to identify that as such a key piece to why it worked would really go against, I think, what a lot of, the current messaging of, we don't need so many emails, there's if it can't be described in a certain amount of time. And there's a lot of, what would be regarded as, top business people who are moving away from the meeting. And so you kind of going back the opposite direction saying, hey, this was a really key piece of what we were doing. And in that growth mode, really keeping people engaged so that they did know what was going on.
Yeah. And you know what? I was just talking to someone this morning. We had like a discussion for like a half hour on this exact topic. It's like, I always hated meetings, but you always wanted to make meetings somewhat productive and engaging somehow. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, people getting away from the meetings, people are less engaged. Right? They don't know what's going on. They're not informed. You don't have that one-on-one interaction with the supervisors and managers as often if you have like a meeting, But you can't just have a meeting to have a meeting. There has to be a reason. And it only needs to be as long as it needs to be. You know, we would schedule it every week for an hour. We would schedule multiple of these meetings a week so that we didn't have to shut down production. So we would like overlap, keep the lines running through the meetings. We actually didn't shut down the whole plant. And people would, one meeting you would have half a first, half a second while the line's still running. An hour later, you would have the other half a first, the other half a second while the line's still running, and they did a little bit of overtime and there was overlap. And, people went to the meetings that would best suited them, but you got to engage again. Everybody heard the same message. And we did 2 or 3 meetings a week. We did it 3 times a week on different days. Try not to do it on Friday and Monday. And
right. I love to hear that there's that kind of problem solving. And I, obviously someone who's, so you kind of go back to your story about talking about solving some of these plant issues and stuff. So that's the way your mindset works. But I think that, in some instances, that isn't the way that people's mindset works, and kind of really identifying that very valuable piece of information there that is easy to skip over, but to say, hey, how can we hit the objective of making sure that all of these people hear the same message and pay all of these people to hear that message? However, how do we do it in a way that makes sure that the plant keeps running? How do we do that in a way? Because that meeting, although very costly for all those people to stand there and listen, becomes exorbitantly more expensive if everything also stops running.
Yeah. And we never stopped. Like we never shut down. We always had people on the docks loading trucks. We always had the lines always ran, unless a couple times where we didn't have something to run, but that was very seldom. And we kept people this way they would hear the message, and we wouldn't change the message throughout the week. I did that on purpose so that everybody heard the same message. So if, let's say you had a meeting on Tuesday and something happened Wednesday, we wouldn't tell people about it Wednesday and Thursday. We tell them about it the next week so that all 3 groups would hear that same message.
Right.
Like the news that came out,
Right. So another thing that kind of stuck out, I said there was 2 things that stuck out to me. One is, there's the ability to inform people. When you were saying these people were aware there was a new director starting. And I think that as businesses grow, oftentimes maybe a business owner who's less experienced may say, I don't know if hiring that director is the right decision. And so what they end up doing is instead of informing, they end up asking. And so what ends up happening is as the business grows, it almost starts to feel a bit more like a panel. And the problem is, as the business grows and now we go through these pieces, sometimes tough decisions have to be made. And sometimes that, those decisions aren't fun. And those times it becomes really hard to kind of rein that back in almost. And so kind of that piece where you're saying, hey, sometimes things happen and we didn't necessarily share it that week, we waited. But it sounds it's a little more strategic than just, hey, we're going to stand around and we're going to chit chat about what's going on in the business. And yes, we want some feedback, but not so much so that everyone, because as the business grows, that becomes more and more opinions. It becomes very hard to appease all of those opinions.
Right. And, I made it very clear. I would always tell people once a quarter, it's like, we want to, because it wasn't just information flowing one way in those meetings. A lot of times it was two ways. We would have votes. We would have a little bit of brainstorming sometimes on, hey, anybody have an idea? We have this problem. Anybody, let me know if you figure out a way to fix it. And they would come into my office or go to the production manager or directors of operations office, help them fix the problems that we have. So it was two-way. But we made it clear to everybody. We want to hear everybody's opinion. We want to hear everybody's suggestion. And I guarantee you, we will not be able to use every opinion or every suggestion. It's impossible, guys. It's like, we're going to pick and choose. Everybody has great ideas. We can only do so many at a time, right? It might go on the back burner. We might not get to your idea for a year. We might not ever get to your idea, but please keep bringing them forward. And we really stress that with people to make sure to open that communication and never made fun of people or bashed them or anything for suggestions or just, oh, we're not going to do that. It's like, we would always go back to them. Here's why we can't do it, or it's a great idea. We would love to do it, but we got these other 3 priorities or 4 priorities this week that we have to get done. And it's the delivery, it's how you deliver that message to them to make sure that they stay engaged and they don't get shut down because their idea wasn't used or their opinion they think it wasn't heard. Right. It's like we were very careful not to make sure we tried not to do that. Obviously not perfect, it happened, Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the engaged workforce is truly often underestimated. And those, you want people more than just to show up, clock in, do what they were asked to do and clock out. But those people who actually are now sitting at home and they're thinking about that problem. Oh, Scott said we need to solve that problem. That piece creating it's passion, it's interest and engagement can be such a difference maker.
And the biggest value that I saw, and this is, you can put a financial tag on this, is the turnover, right? So we had very low single-digit turnover. Every place I worked at, I always got every plant I went to, I got to the point where it was low single-digit turnover at every organization I, was a plant manager above at. And the turnover of people, especially on a manufacturing plant, it takes you can have someone working a piece of equipment in a day or a couple weeks, right? But it takes a year before that person is really good at what they do. Working a filler or working a machine or working a forklift or loading a truck or doing their supply chain job, whatever it is, like a supply chain planner or a scheduler, it takes about a year on average, sometimes longer, sometimes less, depending on the complexity of the job, before they get really good. And so if you don't have that turnover, after about a year, you really see the difference in the performance because everybody is leveled up. And then a year later, everybody's leveled up again and the new people are leveled up. And once you have a culture that's in an organization, okay, let's say you got 50 people and everybody's kind of, you get like 48%, like 90, 99, 95% of the people are all engaged and they're all part of the culture. When you bring in new employees, new associates, new managers, they automatically, it's easier to indoctrinate them when everybody's engaged. If you got like 1 or 2 cheerleaders and everybody else is, a downer, it's, the person doesn't know what to think. But when everybody's engaged and everybody's like helping them out and helpful and everybody's acting safe and everybody cares about quality and cares about the brand and cares about each other, it's easier to indoctrinate the newer people. And so it's easier to maintain the culture, and then you don't have the cost of decreased productivity. You don't have the cost of rehiring. You don't have all those costs associated with turnover. It's huge. It's, in big companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a part of, this organization at one point, and they, originally took hiring very carefully. It was this
Yes.
process of we're dotting the I's and we're crossing the T's. And then at one point there was a little bit of a shift in management, and there was a labor shortage of this specific educated piece. And it basically became if you showed up and you had your certification and you were at the door and it looked like you had a heartbeat, well,
and you can fog a mirror. You can fog a mirror.
Yeah. And so now we've got this string of people. And so you've got, the HR team in the office is basically full-time onboarding people, because as fast as they're coming in the door, they're leaving out the back end. And the slew of problems and people, it was like, well, and the message that we heard at that point was, we won't know if we have a good one unless we try them out. And but the challenges that this created within the culture of like, well, who's this person? Nobody actually invested anything into training these people because they were pretty sure they were leaving the next week.
Right.
And, it was like, well, I wonder what kind of skeletons this guy's got in his closet, because there were so many and there were so many problems. The culture issue that created, it was a problem for years it took to recover from them.
Yep. Yeah. And, my motto is always spend more time hiring so you don't have to spend the time firing people. Right. Mm-hmm. Make sure you do the work up front, where you're sourcing the people from, how you hire them, who you have interview them for screening. Like, I always made sure I had a pool of people every place I worked at. It's like I made sure I had the right people interviewing. Mm-hmm. We discussed the type of people we want, what type of culture, who we're looking for. And then we made sure that the people on the panel interviewing, because I didn't fire people from the company, but fire them from interviewing because they didn't fit this mold, but they had to be like open-minded, not racist, not sexist, because people have these skeletons in their closet that, they won't hire certain types of people for whatever reason. Okay. And they don't even know they're doing it half the time. Mm-hmm. It's just the way they are, like I was at, I had a HR manager who had an assistant HR manager at another plant, and she came in to me. She was like pulling her hair out because the assistant HR manager at this other plant was screening all the resumes for her to interview when she would show up for that week at the other plant. She would go there once a week to the other plant. And it took her a few months to realize that, wow, all the people that were screened are all kind of like one race. That matched the race of the person who was screening the resumes.
Interesting. Yeah.
And she's like, okay, now I have to screen the resumes, And I've had that on interviews too, where some of the people interviewing and just kind of like their comments afterwards is like, okay, that person's not interviewing anymore just because of the comments didn't fit the person.
I think that any time that you have anyone screening something in your business, that person must really be in any capacity, screening any capacity, must be in such a trusted role that truly understands and lives the company values and the vision and whatnot. I actually, I was in discussions with a prospective business to purchase them. And so I had spoken to the owner, and she was talking about how this office manager of hers really runs the show, and this person's super valuable and this and that. And she said, so she goes, and I said, oh, okay. And I said, how do you, what is the sales process? And we're going through all these, the typical due diligence types questions. And she said, basically this office manager gets it all sorted out, and then she meets with the clients. And so I'm supposed to meet with this office manager, and I'm going back and forth trying to get the meeting set up, and things just weren't aligning. And so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? And I got my mom to call as a prospective client. I said, Mom, just give him a call. This is your situation, and find out. Just walk me through what the situation is. And the lady flat out turns her down, says, oh, nope, we're not taking on new clients. Nope, thanks very much. Have a nice day. And I was like, okay, and so I end up meeting with this office manager later, and I just said, hey, so, how do you decide who's a good fit? And she says, oh, we're very full. And I said, so like, you're not, she says, oh no, the owner always wants to take on new clients, but we're super busy. And, she takes so many vacations. And so, if she wants to keep enjoying her time on the beach, well, like, I'm not taking on more work. Why would I do that? And I was like, oh my goodness, this is great. I was dying on the phone. I was like, okay, yeah, I can understand how more work, you're trying not to be like, I would fire you right immediately. But here is someone who doesn't necessarily understand that, hey, if we had more clients, perhaps we would hire more. It's like this person isn't engaged in the business vision and direction. So she's just thinking, hey, if I say yes to this person on the phone, my workload goes up and I don't get paid anymore. So no.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
Well, but there's someone who the owner believes is doing an amazing job. Meanwhile, with a couple of questions, you can find out that, I mean, she is maybe doing a good job with her current workload, but she's doing her very
might have
best.
been great to grow the business 3-4 years ago, but she doesn't want to grow it anymore because it's too much work for her.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think any person that is in that type of role that is screening, whether it's people as clients or even vendors, a lot of times people are making connections with some kind of vendor and maybe they're, hey, well, it's Uncle Sam's cousin and well, pricing may be double, but that guy's, we got a little side deal going on. And so any person that is building those relationships in your business, it really needs to be in a trusted role.
Yeah, definitely. Doesn't matter, sales or supply chain or
Exactly.
marketing, anybody who's talking to vendors, I agree 100%.
Yes. So you talked about being able to promote a lot from within. And I think that is a very interesting piece because there obviously were some key attributes that you were looking for when you were hiring people that maybe were not so skill specific. So yes, can this particular role, can they do the thingamajigger now? But that doesn't allow for a lot of internal promotion. So what were the kinds of attributes that you were looking for in people that went on to be successful that were able to move up?
So when I do my interviews and, I teach other people, usually let's say the manager or the supervisor, they're going to test the technical side, whether the person can physically, mentally do the job. Maybe 25% of my questions are technical based. I'm just validating whether the person can do it, ask them some harder questions, and that's it. The other 75% of the time, and I usually like to spend an hour with the person or more unless I'm like done with the person, but it is really cultural based. Who they work with, what type of environment they like to work in. Questions I ask around that is like, where's the favorite place you ever worked? What was it you liked about that place? Where was the least favorite place you ever worked? What did you like about that place? So we're vital proteins. We're going 100%. And if I got someone that comes in, he's like, I like this place because every day I came in, I knew exactly what I was going to be doing. And it was the same thing for like weeks on end. And, we would change things like once a quarter. It was like, we could see the improvement once a quarter. And I'm like, we're changing things like every other day,
Mm-hmm.
And if you like the steady state, I'm sorry, you're going to hate this place.
Yes.
And I'd tell them that, on the interview. Or who's your favorite boss or who's your least favorite boss, right? Because depending on who their boss they were interviewing for, what the position was, everybody has different personalities. Everybody has different management styles. So trying to match who their previous favorite boss was with their current potential future boss was pretty important, and also the people they worked with, like side by side. And a lot of times on the interviews, a lot of times people would be interviewing their boss. So we would have people on the floor interviewing the supervisors or managers, and that worked great, And it's like, when we're debriefing, it's like, Tiffany, what do you think? Can you work for that person? And it's like, yeah, she seemed all right, or he seemed all right, It's like any red flags come up, The other thing I always did on the interview was everybody had veto power. So if somebody got a bug in the back of their head, there was something about the person that they don't know what it was. It was like, okay, just move on to the next person. Because 9 times out of 10, that's right. And that's why you got to screen your interviewers ahead of time to make sure that they don't have,
those predispositions.
Stuff like that.
Well, you want the intuity to be of benefit, but you want to make sure that it is fair.
Legit.
Yes.
And not, yeah.
100%. I find that interviewing people is actually one of my side passions. I've interviewed, so many people over the years for so many positions. And oftentimes, I spent over a decade in technical trades. And so people would often be like, I'm interviewing with you, it was for a plumbing role or an HVAC role or this or that. And do you know anything about HVAC? And I'd say, no. I mean, enough. no, I'm not going to, and I always kind of compared it to, okay, well, if you're certified, you've been in the industry for a long time. Well, let's say like, okay, well, you've got the driver's license to drive the car, but now let's decide if you're the right person. And then if you are the right person, well, now we can carry on to, the people who can then test your technical knowledge. I'm here to decide if you're a great person for the company and less about the, can you swing the hammer the right way? Because to be honest, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great analogy you have. It's like, okay, we know you can drive a car, but are you a pickup person? Are you a sports car person? Or are you a, hatchback person?
Totally.
What,
I'm going to assume that if you've got the license that you're good to drive. Let's for now call that a check, and then we'll carry on from there. And so, and you go on and you meet some incredible people and some other people that gives you lots of stories for years in the future where you think back and laugh about a particular interview there, here or there. But I actually was a part of hiring at one point. Someone came in and they had someone in their upper management leave very suddenly. And so they brought me in more in a consult role to get this person hired. And I'd interviewed a few people and came up with this person that I thought was really great. And we came in and the business owner now, he's got his list out and he's like, okay, I've got questions. And he's like, okay, do you know what ABCDW means? Do you know what this did? And he's like reading off all of these. And I thought, oh, we are missing the mark here, because those are things that can be taught. Yeah. It's like, we don't need to know every, your business acronym and whether, and so that was very interesting when I was like, what are you hiring for? Because you're not hiring for a specific acronym, then you're looking for, attributes that are going to serve them in the long.
Another question I ask people, which kind of one of the attributes I look for is like initiative for personal growth and stuff. So I ask them, it's like, what do you want to be doing 5 years from now? I mean, you want to be doing the same job? You want to, it's like, and then I let them answer, what do they want? I want to run my own business. Okay, great. You know what it takes to do that, And
I interviewed someone a long time ago, and it was a referral of someone who had been with the company for a long time. And he said, I think this woman should work in the office. I'd love for you to interview her. And so I did. And I asked that very question. And she said, I want to be somewhere doing something.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh boy. And I tried not to laugh. And so then we wrap up the interview. I was like, oh, this girl's not really a fit for our vibe. Not just for that question, but for a number of reasons. And so the guy comes back and he says, so did you love her? And I said, oh, I don't know if she's a fit for the position we're currently looking for and this and that. And then a week later, he comes to me and says, well, that's my girlfriend. So I'm hoping she can get a job. And I was like,
yeah. Well, and you get, the other answer you get is like, I want to work for a great company and be motivated, blah, 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 the textbook answer. And I'm like, no. What do you want to be doing? Everybody wants to work for a great company. Done. Okay, I got that. What do you want to be doing? Have you thought about it? Right. And we're going back to the discussion earlier when we were talking about like promoting people, the first few weeks at Vital Proteins and every company I go to, I try to sit down with people and I ask them, what do they want to do? And then I go over with them, here's what you need to do over the next couple of years to be promoted to a supervisor, to be promoted to a manager. Here's the things where if you do this, I'm not promoting you, and I'm not going to promote you unless I'm 90% confident you're going to succeed. Okay. So you got to prove it. Sometimes I'm wrong, but I want to be 90% confident you're going to succeed in your next role and I will help you get there. And that's why we're able to like promote so many people. Not everybody did it. A lot of people, they say they want to be promoted, they want the more money, but they don't want to do what it takes to get there. Yep. Yeah, I would tell people, it's like, they'd be like, I want to be a supervisor. I'm like, okay, be careful what you wish for. You might get it. So similar to my whole career, there's two sides to my business. I do coaching and I do consulting. On the consulting side, I help manufacturing companies, small to mid-sized companies, scale, grow, fix their issues within the facility. Everybody has a constraint that's, the theory of constraints, it's holding them back. Supply chain issues, quality issues, or they're growing so fast that they don't know how to scale up. And so that's why I help them. I go in and figure out what the issues are and then rally my, other consultants around or myself and help fix their problems, train their people, scale their organization up. Very seldom, 95% of the time, I'll say, even in the companies that I ran, it's processes, right? Once in a while, it's people, right? So there's, I've had a couple times where I talk to, owners, I'm like, this person has to go. Or that person has to go. That was a bad hire or whatever. And that's why I like to be in a part of the helping with the hiring process to make sure they don't hire bad people. But 95% of the time, it's the process. Whether it's the training of the new people or their actual procedures or their onboarding process, it's 95% of the time, it's a process. I heard that a person decides whether they're going to stay or leave a company within the first 24 hours to 1 week. By the end of the first week, most people have decided whether they're going to stick around long-term or not. They might stick around for a year to see if it gets better and hope because the whole job search thing or whatever. But, you win or lose them within, think about it. If you're an owner of a company, if somebody's listening, or a manager, you're going to win or lose your people within the first 24 to 48 hours. So super positive engagement with them. Those first few days, talking to them, get to know them, tell them about the company, tell them about yourself, find out about them. It's just got to engage with them those first few days. Well, you can look at my website, www.chelwoodgroup.com. That's CHEL woodgroup.com, or email me, scott@chelwoodgroup.com. Thank you very much.
Don't forget to click subscribe, comment below, and share the episode with a fellow entrepreneur. If you want to take us on the road, we are available everywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much. See you next time.